All right, so really quick, just so that you guys can see when these were posted. These are a few screenshots from that I pulled off Slack before I got kicked off. These were posted July 1st. So you can see at the top there, July 1st, middle of the summer. Here's a message from Amanda. She started off as a rider, a guide in the barn, and I was told by she and Laura, Hallie, the manager, and I was told by a few people, actually, when I first arrived, that she was basically bullied out of the barn and took up another position on the island, working in the motel and in the front office. I was told she was bullied out of the barn by Jeremy. At first, I thought that maybe they were making too much of Jeremy's manner. He seemed, at least for the week that I was working with him, to be for the most part a good guy, but he would lose his temper and snap at you for certain things. And to me, it seemed understandable, so long as certain things that are life or death situations. Like, you need to do something a certain way when you're in certain situations, working in a barn, working with large animals, or if you're a surgeon on a surgical bed, or assisting him as the nurse, you have to do certain things correctly or people could die. And the people who direct or captain those sorts of situations don't always have the nicest bedside manner, because they are thinking more about how to keep people from dying than about how to put things to you or their assistant or whatever in a nice way. I gave the situation, I gave the people in the situation, every benefit of the doubt, in terms of their goodness, I guess. So I just thought that they didn't like him because he was too rough on, he just wasn't nice, he didn't have a nice manner about him. And a lot of chicks can be that way. They just want everything to be flowery and nice. And I don't need it to be that way, but it does need to be fair. It does need to be just. It does need to be empathetic towards, the well-being of the animals that you're riding on and caring for. And it certainly needs to be fair towards the employees. So I apologize. My cat is, he wants to go out, and no, buddy, you can't go out right now. We're not in a good place for you to go out. He's been trapped in the RV and very upset. Anyway, because we don't really have any place to settle right now. And you can't just be letting your cat out just anywhere or that you're parked up in your RV. So, yeah, thanks for that, assholes. Anyway, I just wanted to show you guys real quick. Here we go. This is proof that Jorge's phone was given to him, and it was being used by another employee before he was using it. So right here you can see the beginning of a message. It's supposedly from Jorge, and I'll go to the next one right here. Here we go. So, it's like it's the same message, but better view of it. It's not from Jorge though. The English is too perfect. Jorge he spoke very fractured English. What he spoke was something much closer to Spanglish. He certainly did not write out, and I have also texts between he and I to prove this. He did not write out messages this succinctly. This worded this perfectly in English, not by a long shot. Also, so you can see right here at the top, Amanda is referring to him as George. That's who they're talking about, is Jorge. Nora right down here. This little message in the middle is referring to him as George. So let's just read the message that supposedly Jorge posted in this. This is the Stables forum on Slack. Again, Slack is the platform that Cedar Island Ranch uses to communicate within the company. So the owners and the managers and the employees can all direct message one another, or they can post on different forums. One forum is for the stables, the barn. Another forum is for the motel. So right here at 7:23 a.m. on July 1st, this past summer, 2022. Someone with Jorge's phone posted, just a reminder that there needs to be a list of rides posted on the bulletin board in the barn, as well as on Slack. And yes, this is per Jeff, as you can see below. Then you see someone named, this is Nora. This is Jeremy's wife, Nora. She used to work in the office. And Nora says, just thought of something. How is George going to know how many and which horses to tack up if there is no list in the barn? Is he on Slack? So she's talking about Jorge and calling him George. And Jeff responds, Jeff is one of the owners, Jeff Krumsick. He responds with, nope, I'll figure that out. For now, we'll just have to continue doing both Slack and the list. We'll put some thought into this system and get it smooth. So Jeff says right there that Jorge is not on Slack at this time that this message is being posted on Slack. I know he wasn't on Slack because I helped Jorge join Slack. Jorge told me himself that David gave Jorge the phone he had been using and let him borrow it for an extended period of time. Jorge told me also that David would demand periodically to look at that phone so that he could oversee the communications between Jorge and the other employees, like, you know, the American citizen employees, because it's easier to bully an illegal immigrant into letting you see their phone and their private communications than it is to bully an American citizen on U.S. soil. So this is, I think this makes it pretty clear, and I'm about to switch over to my texts and show you some of the texts between Jorge and I so you can see how Jorge would text. I think this makes it pretty clear that Jorge did not always have his phone. Someone else had his phone who was working for the company, working for Cedar Island Ranch during the summer, which lends credence to the fact that, Jorge's phone was given to him, lent to him, likely by David, since he said it was David. As for who was using his phone before him, I suspect it might have been a girl named Heidi, who I'm told worked in the barn over the summer. I'm not sure, though. I know that when I signed Jorge up for Slack, it was a little bit different from when I signed up for Slack. It went a little bit differently. I had to create a whole other account. But when I used Jorge's phone to sign him into Slack, it was as if it assigned him an account that was already there. And the name on the account was, I remember it was called Red One, and I thought that was interesting. Red One. And then Jorge and I went in and just changed his name on that account to Jorge. Because he'd be using that account then. And so now I know why. Now I know why there was already an account in there that just plugged his phone into that account. And that it was called, I don't know why it was called Red One, but it was called, a different name. And then we had to change the name to Jorge. It's because another employee was using this phone. I guess David's lending his phone out to employees so he can spy on them. That's creepy. So next order of business, let's find out who's using this phone over the summer. Wonder who that Heidi chick is. Yeah. So let's see if they're, so I've got a bunch of stuff from, okay, so then you can put the list in on Thursday night, and I'll take care of the rest of the weekend, and no lists for Amanda and George needed. How's that sound? Yeah, that is not Jorge. That's not Jorge at all. If anybody knows Jorge, I mean, like, I was shoveling horse poop in horse stalls in a barn with him every day for the last 3 months. I know that's not Jorge. And again, they're referring to him as George. I already made a video talking about how the owners would refer to Jorge as George. I already made that video. Let's go look at the so we got a bunch of stuff, screenshots I grabbed off Slack before they kicked me off so that I wouldn't be able to get my communications. I should have access to my own communication. I'm sorry, buddy. No, you can't go out. I apologize. My cat is really upset. So let's look at texts real quick. No, buddy, I'm so sorry. Here we go. No, buddy, I'm really sorry. So a bunch of these texts, these later texts, I was actually sending to David. But I had assumed that Jorge, before he skipped off to Mexico, probably handed the phone back to David. And so I was sending texts actually to David, but through Jorge's phone. Which he never responded to any of them, so I don't know if he got them or what. But let's just scroll back a little bit. Here we go. The last text he sent me was, she don't show up. So I was told by Jorge that they were hiring a lady to come in and do my job, or pick up, I guess, his job once he left. And here I am asking him about nobody. I'm really sorry. Here I am on Saturday asking him about the lady. She was supposed to show up that day to the barn and show them what she could do, or if she could do anything, like if she knew what she was doing. And I was asking him about her, and he said, she don't show up. True to form for somebody who is still learning English, and it's not their first language. Right here, you can see it says, okay, Kathy, thank you. So the way Jorge would say my name, Kat, talk to text would pick it up as Kathy. They would translate it over as Kathy. So frequently, regularly, when Jorge was texting me, it would come out, and he said my name, it would come out as Kathy. Up here, it should say, C. Let me see. Okay, I still don't have exactly when I'm going to leave. So this is when I was telling him I need to take my cat to the vet appointment, and he kept saying, like, he doesn't know. He thinks he's actually not going to leave the 18th. He's going to leave the 16th. He needs to find out from his boss. I'm like, okay, so can you find out so I know if I have to cancel or not? And he didn't find out. It was just like, eventually it was like, yeah, you have to cancel. So I did. And then, like 2 days later, I was fired. And no money to take my cat to the vet. And he's still weeping a horrible gunk from his eye. And is, like, acting like he's in some pain. And I don't know what to do for him. I don't have the money to take him to the vet now. I would have then, and it would have been dealt with if Jorge wasn't playing games and playing around and acting like, oh, I don't know if I'm leaving the 16th or the 18th. He had been saying for a long time he was leaving the 18th. And then finally, yeah, he did leave the 18th. He had me cancel the appointment I made for my cat on the 16th because he was saying it was a good chance he was leaving the 16th and he wouldn't be there to cover the barn shift. And he knew I was very worried for my cat. He'd come up with other options for similar problems in the past, you know, like other ways of dealing with something like that. But for this particular incident, when I really needed to take my cat into the vet, there was just no solutions. I just had to cancel that appointment and be there to cover the barn shift. We couldn't get Quinn to do it or anything, you know, because he wasn't sure if he was going to be there. Well, he was there, and he was there until the 18th. So I canceled that appointment for nothing, and my cat is now sick, and I have no way of getting him care, and I don't know what to do about that. And the owners, David Saint Singh, he doesn't care, and Elaine Crowell doesn't care. They don't give a shit. They don't give a shit, or they'd be compensating me for all this nonsense. So I'm sure they're perfectly happy to see that my cat's going to die because they placed an illegal immigrant above me in that barn. And he was toying around with me because he wanted to get my job open for his family and friends. And also, they were happy to, the bosses, the owners, I suspect, were quite happy for that to happen because they also didn't want to pay an American citizen higher wages and have me using up a lot in the RV park when they could pay an illegal immigrant much less and have them packed into a bunkhouse out back behind the post office with like 6 other illegal immigrants. Not taking up a valuable lot space in the RV park. So here we go. See, Kathy. See, Kathy. Hey, are we tacking up Dolly, Waylon, and Shania? Because a lot of times I would show up way before him to that barn. Like, on time. But, like, at the time he would tell me to show up. And I'd be there, you know, like, hey, tell me who to tack up. I might as well get started. Like, rather than stand here and wait for you to show up. So, sí, Kathy. He's even using sí. Yes, sí, Kathy. Kat. Yeah, so this is Jorge. This is the real Jorge speaking to me, texting me in these texts and these messages. And whoever that was posting those messages on Slack was over the summer was not Jorge. So just a bit of proof, some more evidence to show you guys that, yeah. David Singh, definitely, according to Jorge, Camacho Rivera, and according to some evidence I've been gathering, and I also got some of the information on the phone number. So here's the phone number that Jorge was using, 252-369-1107. It's an AT&T number. It's also a North Carolina number. That's 252 is North Carolina. Why would Jorge, the illegal immigrant who's been here for 3 years and was only actually planning to be here 2 years, he stayed an extra year because he didn't have enough money to go back with. Why would he get a number in North Carolina if he's planning on just being here, like make some money and then go home? Why wouldn't he just have a burner phone? Or, borrow a phone from somebody like David? And I think David's more than happy to lend phones out to employees if he thinks it'll give him the ability to spy on his employees. And again, Jorge told me that David would frequently demand to see his phone so that he could look at Jorge's communications with other employees. And so David could spy on his American citizen employees. And I guess find reasons to fire them. When he decided that they were no longer worth paying. Not that they weren't doing a good job or trying hard, just, illegal immigrants are easier to work with if you are a sociopath and you like bullying people and not paying people the value of a fair, decent value for their labor. Then I suppose working with illegal immigrants is way easier to work with. Personally, it was hard to work with them out on that beach on those horses because it's very hard for the riders to make out what you're saying to begin with wind and such and elements. If you speak English, let alone if you speak Spanglish, and it's mostly it's English with a very heavy Spanish accent, and you don't know a lot of the English words. And so a lot of times I would have to relay to the riders while I was out there. I don't know how they made it work when I was out on those rides, because I went out on so few, although a lot of it was shut down for a while. But I know when I was out on those rides, a lot of the stuff that Jorge said I had to relay to the riders because they just couldn't make heads or tails of what he was saying. I was more used to making out what he was saying because I worked with him every day in the barn, and we would talk while shoveling horse shit. So, yeah. Just providing some evidence. There's more evidence I've been gathering. Yeah. So, there's that. And I'm gonna shut this down and post it and go to bed for the night. Figure out what's happening tomorrow. I don't know what to do for my cat. I really don't. I can't believe these people are so disgusting and callous that they did this to me when I worked very hard for them in that barn and twisted myself inside out to be a good worker. And they didn't like that I was insisting that they need to spend more money on those horses and on that barn. It was ridiculous that Shania never saw a vet for that open wound on her ankle, and the entire time I was there, a vet came in to see Faith because she had colic, and that was dire, and she could have died. And that was the only time that the vet was called in when I was there. Farrier came in twice, but the vet only came in once, and I was excited at first. I thought, like, okay, good, she'll see Shania too. No, they just had her come in, see Faith. Jorge never told her to look at Shania. And that was it. The entire time I was there, the wound on Shania's ankle was just like open and raw and nasty. Occasionally it would look like it was getting better, and then she'd rip it open and it'd be open and raw and nasty again. And Jorge would just try to fix it with home remedies. He'd slap some cream on it. He'd wrap it up with very unsanitary, poorly stored vet wrap that was cut with rusty scissors. He'd walk her through salt water out in the ocean, or have me walk her through salt water out in the ocean, and said that would heal it all up. Yeah, well, in the 3 months that I was there, it never completely healed up. It was still there when I left. And I do think that it was a nervous tick. It was anxiety and depression because she was a privately owned horse, and then she was left behind there. And that situation, to go from being a privately owned horse to being basically a workhorse in that situation where you're just given your most basic needs, and other than that, for the most part, you're ignored. That's got to be really, really, really rough. And horses do form social attachments. They're herd animals. They're familial, and but I suspect that a horse therapist would have been too expensive for David to spring for, and or pay us to give Shania the real attention that she needed to keep her from being so depressed and anxious. You could see it all over her. If you have any feeling for animals, the more I got to know her, the more I realized she's very, very sad and very depressed. And this was seconded. This was agreed upon by others who also spent a bunch of time with Shania and in the barn. Yeah. So, really, the fix for Shania, I think, because at first I was worried maybe it was an allergic reaction to something in the feed and the hay, but no. I think it's a manifestation of anxiety and depression because that horse was abandoned there, and those are terrible conditions for what was once a privately owned horse. And I believe a lot of those horses were privately owned horses before they were bought up by David and put in that barn. And now they are given bare basic minimum needs. They're fed and watered. If they're really, really sick, then maybe they'll call the vet. Other than that, everything is expected to be maintained by the barn hands. We're not allowed to ask for things that the horses need, or we'll get in trouble. Jorge told me many times, warned me with a scared look on his face sometimes too, like, don't do it. Don't ask for this. Don't ask for that. Don't post saying we need this, especially when I was going to post the list of tools and stuff that the barn needed. Jorge was like, don't do it. Don't do it. And I was like, I was thinking he was being kind of ridiculous. I was like, come on, they've got to, want to do what they can for these horses. And I'm not asking for that much. Like, they can afford what I'm asking for. This barn needs it. Those horses need it. Like, that's just the way it is. The barn had, again, it was rat infested and snake infested. There were holes chewed in everything giant holes by rats, chewed by rats. There were holes in the stalls with cord coming out of them, wires coming out of them, phone cord that the horses were chewing on. Like the far back right stall, that's sort of more on the outside of the barn. It's right next to the hayloft where the bales of hay are kept in the back of the barn. Butterscotch was being kept in there last I was there. There was a big old hole in the side of the barn there with phone cord coming out of it into Butterscotch's stall, and it was clear it was being chewed on. I tried my damnedest to stick that phone cord back in there. It kept coming out or getting pulled out and chewed on. I was like, a lot of this needs to be patched up, fixed up. We did not have the proper tools or materials to properly patch up the fencing for the stalls around the horses' stalls. Because they would kick down and shove over those fences in between their stalls, around their stalls regularly. We'd go out there, I think once every few days, and there would be some kind of issue with the fencing, which is normal. But then we should have the appropriate tools necessary to patch things up around there. we were just not being provided with what was necessary for that job. And I was told repeatedly by Jorge, and then I saw evidence of this myself, and was told by David himself that he's cheap. And Jorge said it's because, because David's cheap. He won't pay for things. We have to just make it work with what we have. So because of that, a lot of injuries and problems that the horses had went unaddressed, and or just like they slap window dressing on it. They slap window dressing on it and keep hoping it's going to get better on its own. I've heard the same from locals about that barn, essentially. The barn's falling apart at the seams. It's disgusting. I've been told it was built years and years ago, and just once in a while they put some new siding on it, and they just slap some window dressing on it and make it look good from the outside. But it is ugh on the inside. And I was told that they were going to build a whole new barn over the winter. I saw no sign that they were even beginning to do that while I was there. And again, I left at the end of December. And I'm trying to remember the vet wrap, things like the vet wrap and the scissors used to cut the vet wrap were super unsanitary. They were not stored properly. I was raised in a family of nurses and nurse practitioners and paramedics. I had it drilled into me growing up, good sanitation and good hygiene. Again, I know it's a barn. I know that it's not going to be like a sterile surgeon's bay, but even barns should have standards. I can understand a lot of stuff around that barn getting tons of dirt and dust and stuff blown on it, and understandable for like the saddles and things like that. But we can do better when it comes to things like the vet wrap and the scissors used to cut the vet wrap. Like those things should not be sitting out on shelves, collecting dust and dirt and having the wind blow sand in on them all day off the beach, when we could easily store those things in Tupperware containers and keep them, for the most part, relatively sanitized and clean, because we are using these things to wrap and dress horse wounds, like the wounds on living creatures. And you could just be making the wound way worse. If you're not using properly sanitized, properly stored veterinary medical equipment. It was like pulling teeth sometimes. It was just the never-ending story of me trying to like institute some little habits and behaviors and routines that would make things just so much better and cleaner and more sanitized around there and better for the horses. Little things like me putting the vet wrap and the scissors into a Tupperware container and then continuing to do so, even though Jorge and the guys, they would just leave stuff out on the shelves. It's like certain things out that just, I kept going like, this shouldn't be left out. And it just seemed like no matter how many times I would try to set the example, like, no, he put it in the Tupperware container. They just wouldn't get it. It was like, they just wanted to do the easiest thing, just use the tools or whatever, throw it to the side and let it rust up, let it get dirty, and not put certain things away in certain areas where it would maintain the whole thing better. It's just, and I was happy to do that. I even said to Jorge, like, I don't need to take rides out. I'm fine with if they just want to pay me to like clean up after you people and keep the barn relatively organized, so that, things like vet wrap and the scissors and stuff like are kept somewhat sanitized. Things that we need are ordered regularly, stuff like that. That's kind of its own job to some degree. Like you have to always be on top of the feed, make sure the feed, the hay, so on and so forth. Sweeping around there, sweeping up the barn office, wiping stuff down. I mean, I did a full-scale, huge cleaning of that barn office. It was filthy when I got there. I mean, filthy. All right, my boy cat is really upset. All right, so I'm going to end this one, but I just want to show you guys some evidence that, that was not Jorge's phone always. It was somebody else's phone, and I suspect it was David's. So, all right, I'm going to end this.